A hug that changed everything. In the glittering atrium of the Grandview Plaza, a sprawling upscale mall in downtown Chicago, a small voice cut through the hum of shoppers. "I don't need your money, sir. I just want a hug like the one you gave your kid." The words, spoken by a young boy, stopped several passers-by in their tracks. Elliot Carver, CEO of Carver Enterprises and one of the wealthiest men in the Midwest, froze mid-stride, his polished loafers gleaming under the chandeliers. He'd just emerged from an upscale toy boutique, arms laden with bags for his 8-year-old son, Ethan. The boy who spoke, a skinny kid in faded sneakers, sat cross-legged by the mall's marble fountain, his dark eyes watching families with a mix of longing and quiet resolve. "Sorry, kid. I'm busy," Elliot snapped, smoothing his tailored suit jacket. His tone dripped with the kind of authority that silenced boardrooms. He wasn't used to being approached, especially not by someone like this boy, whose worn clothes screamed a world far removed from Elliot's penthouse existence. The boy, Jamal Carter, stood slowly, brushing dust off his jeans. "It's not about being busy, sir. It's about kindness. I saw you hug your son in there. Looked nice. I just thought maybe you had one to spare." Elliot's jaw tightened. He wasn't touched. He was annoyed. "Where's your family? Kids shouldn't be wandering malls alone. Someone ought to call security." "My mom's cleaning offices upstairs," Jamal said, unfazed. "She'll come get me when her shift's done. Till then, I'm just watching folks. Happy folks." Elliot's lip curled. A cleaner's kid. Figures. "Look, kid, I don't know what you're playing at, but I don't have time for sob stories." He turned to leave, but Jamal's voice stopped him again. "It's not a story. I've just never had a dad's hug. You look like you're good at it." For a split second, something flickered in Elliot's eyes. Maybe a memory of his cold, loveless childhood. But it vanished as quickly as it came. He crouched to Jamal's level, his voice low and cutting. "Listen up, kid. The world doesn't owe you anything. Learn that now, or you'll be sorry later." He stood, brushing off his knees like he'd touched something dirty. "Now move." Jamal didn't budge. His gaze held Elliot's steady and unnervingly wise for an 8-year-old. "You're right. The world doesn't owe me. But I don't owe it anything, either." Elliot blinked, thrown off by the boy's calm defiance. Before he could respond, Ethan tugged at his sleeve. "Dad, why are you talking to him? He's not like us." Elliot smirked, ruffling his son's hair. "That's right, Ethan. Some people just don't fit in our world. Let's go." As they walked away, Jamal stood still, his small hands tightening into fists. His face, though, stayed calm, eerily so. A woman in a cleaning uniform rushed over, her face etched with worry. "Jamal, honey, I'm sorry I took so long. Everything okay?" Jamal glanced at his mother, then back at the spot where Elliot had vanished into the crowd. "Yeah, Mom. Something happened. I learned something big today." "What's that, sweetheart?" his mother, Lena, asked, kneeling beside him. Jamal's lips curved into a determined smile. "Some people need to learn what kindness is, and I think I'm the one to teach them." Lena frowned, not quite understanding. But the steel in her son's voice told her this moment had sparked something powerful. Something that would ripple far beyond this mall. 3 days later, Jamal sat in the quiet corner of the public library, flipping through a worn copy of Business Insider. On the cover was Elliot Carver, grinning under the headline, "The Titan of Industry, How Elliot Carver Built a $2.5 billion Empire." Jamal traced his finger over the photo, committing every detail of that smug face to memory. It wasn't anger driving him. It was purpose. "He's real rich, huh?" Lena said, sitting beside him after her shift. Her hands were rough from years of scrubbing floors, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. "Yeah, Mom. Real rich." Jamal closed the magazine. "But money's not everything, right?" Lena smiled, proud of her son's wisdom. What she didn't know was that Jamal had a gift, a near photographic memory and a mind that devoured complex ideas like they were picture books. His teachers had started to notice, calling him exceptional in hushed tones. That same week, Elliot appeared on a local news channel pontificating about corporate responsibility. "We can't just hand out charity to everyone," he said, adjusting his cufflinks. "Some people need to learn that nothing in life is free. Education, wasted on those without the right foundation, it's just throwing money away." Across town, Jamal watched the interview on the library's old TV. Each word carved itself into his mind, fueling a fire that didn't burn with rage, but with clarity. He smiled, a small, knowing smile. "Why are you smiling, kiddo?" asked Miss Clara, the librarian who'd taken a shine to Jamal. "Because he just told me exactly what I need to do," Jamal said, turning back to a stack of books on finance and economics. At his school science fair the next week, Jamal's project turned heads. A detailed report on economic inequality and access to education, complete with charts and data that stunned his teachers. "Where'd you get all this?" his teacher, Ms. Harper, asked, flipping through pages that looked like they belonged in a university thesis. "Research," Jamal said simply. "I studied people who started with nothing and made it big, and others who were born rich and do nothing for anyone else." Ms. Harper noticed a folder labeled Carver Enterprises. "Why this company?" Jamal met her gaze, calm as ever. "Because one day I'm going to run it, or maybe I'll own it." She laughed, thinking it was a kid's dream. But the precision of his work, the fire in his eyes, told her this was no fantasy. It was a blueprint. Meanwhile, Elliot Carver went on with his gilded life, oblivious to the seed of resolve he'd planted in a boy he barely remembered. At home, Jamal placed his science fair trophy next to a clipped photo of Carver Enterprises headquarters. "One day," he whispered, "you'll see what happens when you underestimate someone." Lena overheard, a chill running through her. Her boy was planning something bigger than she could grasp. 8 years later, Jamal Carter, now 16, was no longer the skinny kid by the fountain. He was a prodigy, accepted into Chicago's prestigious Northlake University on a full scholarship, 2 years younger than his peers. His target? The same elite institution where Elliot Carver gave guest lectures on meritocracy. In his first month, Jamal caught the eye of Professor Angela Brooks, a black woman in her 50s who taught corporate ethics and had publicly challenged Carver's views. "You're the one who wrote that paper on corporate discrimination," she said after class, eyeing Jamal with interest. "Why Carver Enterprises?" "Let's just say I have history with its CEO," Jamal said, his tone measured but honest. Professor Brooks nodded. "Personal motivations make the best research. Want to work on a project together?" That partnership changed everything. With Brooks's guidance, Jamal dug into Carver Enterprises' public records, uncovering a web of tax breaks and subsidies, $52 million over a decade, meant for community programs that never materialized. The funds had been funneled into Carver's pet projects, all within legal loopholes. "This is dynamite," Professor Brooks said, reviewing Jamal's evidence. "But Carver's got powerful friends. You need to be surgical." "I will be," Jamal said, his voice steady. "I'm not just exposing him, I'm building something better." He revealed his plan, a business model for an ethical company that could outshine Carver Enterprises while proving that profit and purpose could coexist. At 16, Jamal had designed a framework that left Professor Brooks speechless. "You're serious about this," she said, half in awe. "Dead serious," Jamal replied. "Carver taught me the world owes me nothing. Now I'll show him what happens when I owe his world nothing either." The showdown came during Elliot Carver's annual lecture at Northlake University. The auditorium buzzed with 600 attendees, executives, academics, and students. Elliot, now 46, strode across the stage, basking in his $2.8 billion empire. "Success isn't luck," he declared. "It's about breeding, education, and knowing your place." In the front row, Jamal sat calmly, a briefcase at his feet. Professor Brooks sat beside him, her case ready. When the Q&A opened, Jamal stood. "Mr. Carver, you talk about knowing your place. What about leaders who misuse public funds to build their empires?" Elliot's smile faltered. "Young man, public-private partnerships are standard. Maybe take a few more classes before you challenge me." "I've studied enough," Jamal said, pulling a thick folder from his briefcase. Carver Enterprises took $52 million in tax incentives for programs that never happened. I have memos where you ordered the funds redirected. The room went silent. Professor Brooks handed out copies of the evidence, emails, contracts, and financial records. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as pages turned. Elliot's face paled. "This is slander. My lawyers—" "Are you already informed?" Jamal cut in, holding up his phone. "So are the IRS, the DOJ, and 2 state oversight committees." Elliot's eyes locked on Jamal, and recognition hit like a freight train. "You, the kid from the mall?" Jamal's smile was ice cold. "You told me the world owed me nothing, so I decided I didn't owe your world anything either." The screens behind Elliot lit up with text messages he'd sent the previous night, ordering his team to shred documents. Gasps filled the room. "Obstruction of justice," Professor Brooks said, her voice ringing with authority. As federal agents moved in, Elliot's empire crumbled in real time, broadcast by news cameras, and Jamal had tipped off. "You underestimated me," Jamal said, stepping forward, "and everyone likes me. That was your mistake." 2 years later, Jamal Carter, now 18, stood at the helm of the Carter Foundation, a non-profit transforming lives through education and opportunity. Carver Enterprises, gutted by scandal, had been acquired by Jamal at auction for pennies on the dollar. He'd turned it into a beacon of ethical business, mentoring thousands of kids like the one he'd been. Elliot, meanwhile, was a shadow of himself. Out of prison after 20 months, he worked as a clerk in a strip mall electronics shop, his name toxic in the business world. His son, Ethan, lived with his mother in another state, and his old allies had vanished. At Northlake's graduation, Jamal gave the keynote speech. "A boy once asked for a hug and was told the world owed him nothing," he said, his voice steady. He decided to build a world that owed everyone a chance. The crowd roared. Lena, now a community organizer funded by her son's foundation, wiped away tears. Professor Brooks, now a board member, beamed. Later, at an orphanage Jamal sponsored, a young girl asked, "Is it true you were poor like us?" Jamal knelt, meeting her eyes. "Yeah, and I learned it's not where you start. It's the strength you carry inside." She hugged him, and in that moment, the cycle broke. The kindness denied to one child was now given freely to another. Elliot Carver had tried to teach Jamal his place. Instead, Jamal created a world where every child could claim theirs, a legacy of hope that outshone all the cruelty it was born from.